Does vulnerability mean weakness? Like most men, that's what I was taught when I was little, and for the longest time I thought that men were not supposed to be vulnerable. I used to think that crying would automatically make me less of a person, since it would mean that I was leaving all my insecurities and fears out in the open. But in the long run, I came to realize that vulnerability actually allows us to connect with other people. In fact, some of the best relationships I've cultivated in my life come from being vulnerable. However, that's just my story. Most men prefer to stay away from this type of conversation. But why is that? While modern studies are encouraging us to change the way we look at masculinity, society is still putting pressure on men to keep things to themselves instead of opening up. And so I began to ask myself, are there enough vulnerable men in the world? In a world where fathers often teach their boys to toughen up, I didn't have someone to teach that to me, at least not in that way. Instead, courage was taught to me by a group of women, including my mom, my grandmothers, my aunties, and other female figures I met throughout my life. But the way they taught me to be strong and courageous was not the typical way a father would teach his boy. With these ladies, I learned that courage and strength comes from being open and vulnerable. This is a virtue that you can often find among women, but not so easily among men. The problem is that, as a boy, being vulnerable often poses the risk of being embarrassed or hurt by the way other people responded to it. While I was growing up, I always felt so scared to be vulnerable, let alone look vulnerable. And I soon realized that I wasn't alone. A lot of men have had the same experience because society has taught us that being a man is all about looking tough. Sadly, a lot of people could look at my life and be all like, oh, he's so sensitive, he's not a man enough, he's so vulnerable. And so, even though I grew up without a father figure, I was still under the impression that I needed to look tough to be a man. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We all know that society is not always right. So just because people say men cannot be vulnerable, it doesn't mean that they should stick to that rule. Vulnerability is actually strength. In order to be a strong and healthy individual, vulnerability should be a part of the equation when building relationships with others. In doing so, one strengthens those relationships while improving mental health and the quality of life. Being vulnerable also takes away the pressure that you have to do everything on your own. A study published in the Sage journals showed that by voicing our feelings, we can decrease the impact of our emotions and overcome them faster. In other words, being vulnerable helps us express what's going on inside of us so we can have a better grasp of our emotions and solve our problems more easily. That is why I can confidently say that vulnerability is a sign of courage, not a weakness. Problem is that there are so many men out there who are afraid and unfamiliar in regards to this part of their lives. In a way, men have become tolerant to a lifestyle in which they keep things to themselves. Today, a lot of men have remained silent in some of the most pivotal moments of their lives. From relationships to their own self-perception, they are afraid to talk about the hard things simply because they think it's wrong. Now, I'm not here to blame them or make them feel bad, but I want to challenge anyone watching this video to look at vulnerability from a different perspective. The whole idea that men can't be vulnerable is rooted in one of the oldest lies that has slowly become outdated, which says that men can't cry. This lie is linked to a binary way in which the world works. Just like men can't cry, women are expected to cook, clean the house and take care of their families, while men go to work and do the heavy lifting. In this system, any vulnerable man is defying the norms of these rooted beliefs. Just look around you. Yogurt and fitness cereals are mostly marketed for women, while sports cars are marketed targeting mostly men. But these products can quickly be marketed to a different market with quick changes that don't impact their essence. Paint the car pink and you can sell it to women, or make the yogurt a bro-gurt and then you'll have more men interested in it. At this point, I'm sure you can see how silly and irrelevant those labels are. However, it's because of these labels that a lot of men can't be vulnerable, and that's why a lot of them don't cry these days. There's even a famous phrase that is still popular today, which says that big boy don't cry. However, psychology tells us otherwise. In an article published in Medical News today, experts come to the conclusion that crying is not only valid, but it is in fact necessary and healthy for everyone, including men. Crying has a soothing effect as it regulates our emotions, calms ourselves, and reduces our distress. It even fights bacteria, aids sleep, and improves our vision. Moreover, it has an interpersonal benefit that helps us connect with the world around us. So, if crying is something so beneficial to our health and needed to process a strong emotion, why should it be reserved for females? It seems like it's about time to defy those gender stereotypes that have shaped our society. The thing is that most of the time, vulnerability comes with crying. And this is something that I used to avoid. As a 6'3", 220-pound man, I used to judge myself if I felt like crying, simply because of the way I looked. I mean, would you expect a big guy to be a big crier? But again, with time and maturity, I accepted the fact that crying does not make me weak. It actually makes me stronger. Then, there are times when my crying was a bit too much. I mean, I had tears in my eyes at the end of the last Spider-Man movie. Yes, you can judge if you want. However, I'm proud of it because it means that I have feelings. I'm alive and have the ability to feel things. So, even if the alpha male can cry, and trust me, the most manly men can cry. But don't get me wrong, as soon as I wake up every day, I get on the battlefield and I go after my dreams. Because being vulnerable does not mean you get to shy away from a fight. Throughout my life, one thing that I've observed is that most dads teach their boys to fight. In a world in which men have not been allowed to cry, they've been taught to fight for themselves and those they love. To be honest, I kind of like that. Just because I do agree that we should stand for ourselves and those we love, however, that doesn't mean that we should go out there looking for trouble and messing with anyone who crosses our path. No, that's being a bully. But I do believe we can work on our strength to go after battles that are worth fighting. Now, the question is, how does a man choose his battles? So many times, many of us pick the wrong battles. Battles that add no meaning, joy, or fulfillment to our lives. Instead, they just feed our fragile ego with superficial victories. On the other hand, the right battles are those that bring us closer to justice and a whole set of values that add meaning to our lives. And even if we lose them, the right battles always teach us a lesson that ultimately mark a milestone in our journey towards a greater cause. One of the best ways to differentiate these battles is to figure out how long it will take us to fight them. Usually, the wrong battles start in the heat of the moment. From road rage to a lot of angry outbursts, battles that start quickly often lead to misery and distract us from becoming a better person. Meanwhile, the right battles take time to take off. They often need a lot of thought and self-reflections just so we can really think of the issues that are important to us. Before the right battle, the initial anger and any trace of momentary rage is gone. All that's left in a desire is to pick the right fight with the hopes of making a positive impact. And so, the best thing to do when coming before a fight is to ask ourselves, should I pick up this battle or not? It might be difficult to find a way out in a world that has taught men to keep things to themselves and not be vulnerable. But here's some advice that you can take into consideration in case you want to explore the strength within your own vulnerability. Be less afraid of feeling. When you've been detached from strong emotions for far too long, it might be difficult to identify your feelings. But you can start by talking about your fears and admitting your imperfections. Surely you might feel fragile at first, but you'll start seeing how being more honest and open can make you feel more close to your future self. Spend time with yourself. There's nothing wrong with being alone. Use that time to reflect and appreciate the world around you. Moreover, use that time to delve deeper in your own experiences and explore how you can bring more vulnerability in your manhood. Surround yourself with other vulnerable men. It's highly encouraged to have all kinds of friends. Just remember, you absorb the energy of the people that surround you. So if you hang out with men who are more open about their emotions, you'll naturally learn to be more vulnerable as well. It takes time to change a behavior that's been deeply rooted inside of us, right? But if there's something that I want you to understand from this video is that there's an alternative to the way society has taught us to express our emotions. There is freedom in letting our emotions come to the surface, and there's definitely a stronger version of ourselves waiting to come out as long as we are open to speak out our minds without the fear of being hurt by the reaction of others. Thank you for watching this video. I would appreciate it if you could subscribe, like, and leave a comment down below. And I'll see you in the next one.